Donna.
Thank you, Donna.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's call the meeting to order at 6:01. And first up, public comment. I don't see any public, so we'll go right beyond that. And then we have approval of minutes. Marshall sent those over earlier today. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at those. We have the meeting minutes of April 29th.
I move approval.
If I may, oh man,
We didn't do these already, did we?
yeah, I was going to say, if you look at my email.
Oh, yeah, I think you did already.
Yeah.
It said they're already approved.
All right, negative on that one then, sorry. It's been one of those days. I spent 4.5 hours working on a bid proposal today for the town. And had to be on a webinar at 3 o'clock about spending the federal money that's been assigned to us possibly. So I made the mistake of closing my laptop and it disconnected me from the internet. And it was an online application. I lost everything. Everything. So late night tonight, because it's got to be in by tomorrow.
Wow.
All right, just to clarify, the meeting minutes of April 29th were approved. I just sent you the final version.
Yep.
But I sent you a draft of the May 13th meeting.
Correct.
Which has that you approve the minutes in it.
Right,
Those are the ones up for consideration.
right. Okay, so then forget what I said about the April 29th meeting. So we have minutes from May 13th. And that was the last meeting when Walt was absent. So would anybody other than Walt like to give me an approval of the minutes for a motion to approve the minutes for May 13th?
I'll make that motion.
All right, made by Dave Perry and seconded. I'll second it, make it easy. Bill Johnson, second. Any discussion on the minutes? Then I will call the roll. Bill Johnson, yes. Dave Perry,
Yes.
Glenn Hathaway,
Yes.
Marshall Dennis,
Yes.
and Walt Meissner will be an abstention. Okay, perfect. Does anybody have any new business that they want to bring forward?
The only thing I'll note is that if you look at the webpage for the Bylaw Review Committee, I don't think any of our meeting minutes have been posted.
Okay, so I'm going to plead somewhat ignorant to that. Is that something I'm supposed to be doing?
I don't know.
Typically, I just went through, the only reason I have a sense of it, I just went through it with the planning board minutes and learned that Roger Hoyt would always post our minutes for ourselves, but I turned it over to Heather. And so I would say that you, Bill, probably, once these are approved, either you or Marshall can send them directly to Mary and say, please post.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can take care of that if that's.
Okay, yeah, honestly, I didn't know what the process was. I thought
I didn't either. The only reason I know now is because it happened to me this week and I didn't know. I said, who's supposed to post these? And they told me I was, and I said, you don't want me anywhere near the website.
Exactly, yeah.
So you better have somebody else. And then, so we worked it out that Heather's always going to post planning board minutes.
Okay. So Marshall, if you can do that, then I would
I will.
appreciate that because that's the third rail for me too. I don't want to.
No,
get anywhere near that.
well, as long as, like, well, I don't have access directly to the website, but I
Well,
can
I know-
funnel through Mary.
Ed, I don't know what meeting I was at, but something came up about this, not about our group, but about posting minutes. And Mary made the comment that, yeah, you can post those direct to the meeting minutes, direct to the web. And I remember saying to her, I said, no, if that's my responsibility, I'm not doing it because, you're already getting a ton of my time. And now you want me to be like the administrative assistant too and go in and do we want 25 different people posting information on the website? My answer is no.
Well, and therein lies the problem with whatever that instructional sequence that happened way back when, where, I think that the guidance was that, everybody would have a go at it, but clearly that's not the way it should be.
No, was that My Town Government deal that the former TA
Yes,
did?
yes.
Okay. Well, as you know, we've got that whole website thing going on. So, and that webinar I did today, I just found out that upgrading your websites is something that the feds will pay for with the American Recovery Plan. So learned that today. So now I know where the funding is going to be to get the website upgraded. So Marshall, I would appreciate you, doing that, because we've been diligent about doing the minutes and passing them and all that kind of stuff. So it's not that
Well,
we're.
yeah, I mean, everything's up to date. So it's just a matter of getting them on the web.
Yeah, so send them off to Mary, and then if she gives you any pushback, just let me know and I'll deal with it. But,
Okay, will do. Okay.
thanks for bringing that up though, because somebody will be complaining about that, I'm sure.
Right.
I'll get another letter telling me I'm in dereliction of my duty for the town. Okay, so zoning bylaws. And did I read it correctly that we're doing section 1, 1 through 4? That's what we're doing tonight, right?
I believe.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we said last week,
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I wrote down. But then when I was looking at it,
2 weeks ago.
there wasn't a ton of pages there, and I said, okay, maybe I messed that up. We're actually doing the first whole section, but
Yeah, it's not bad, Bill. There's 24 pages and 7 pages are just, charts that, label residents, non-residents, conforming. So it should be pretty brief tonight.
that's okay with me.
Yeah.
Okay, who's got, anybody got anything as we start with section 1, the general bylaw, section 1.1?
All right. Who's in the background?
That would be my granddaughter.
All right, Dave. That'll do it. Duly noted. The only comment I have on section 1 general is that I think this just needs to be reviewed in light of the state's zoning act, which I think the most recent version thereof is 2016. To make sure that the definitions that we are setting forth are consistent with the definitions as set forth in the zoning act, and that, whatever we have stated in section 1 are not, in contrast or to the zoning act itself.
I would agree with that.
And which I don't think it is, otherwise it would never have been approved, but nonetheless, I think it's worth, reviewing to make sure that what we've said, which sets the tone for all the rest of the zoning bylaws, is in conformance with the most recent version of the zoning act.
Yeah, and that's something that, and again, we're kind of doing this thing a little bit backwards, because that is something that will happen when general code conducts their legal analysis. They'll run that against the state codes and things like that, but we're not doing that up front. We're kind of doing that after the fact. So, but I've noted it on my book here, and I think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's anything, we need to per se do, but it's just something that we should convey to general code and whomever that we want to be sure.
Okay, that's fair. Anybody else have anything on 1.1?
Well, just to add to that, 1.21, I'm sorry, you're going to do section by paragraph, or are you just asking section 1 in total?
Well, I was going to do them, 1.1, then we'll go to
Okay, I'll
1.2.
stop. I don't have anything for 1.1.
Okay.
1.1, the only thing I would say, and this is more of a strategic thing, and it has nothing to do with what we do initially. This is something for the select board to think about later, is that it doesn't say anything about promoting and protecting the economic well-being of the town. And considering that zoning bylaws are often considered in economic revitalization plans, it may be a purpose that the select board would want to consider for the future. It's not relevant to me right now or anything else like that. It's just a thought.
Okay, fair enough. That's a good idea. Anybody, anything else on 1.1?
Not on 1.1, but there are a couple of things in the definitions, Bill, that when we get there, I'd like to bring up to everybody's attention.
Okay, very good. Then let's go to 1.2, basic requirements. Anybody have anything there?
Yeah.
Probably written.
This is Glenn Hathaway. To Marshall's point, at the 1.21, this bylaw shall not repeal, annul, or in any way impair or remove the necessity of compliance with any rule, regulation, bylaw, permit, or provision of law. So, Marshall, I think we're covered that if general code, we just remind them, it can't be something that conflicts with a law that's in place. So I think we're covered there. But again, to your point, yes, we should still go to general code and highlight something that, that's obvious. Wait a minute, that's you're in conflict with what the law is.
And I suspect that if you're in conflict, it defers to Mass General Law.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I had for 1.2.
I just quickly speaking to Walter's comment about the promoting and protecting the economic viability of the town. That doesn't appear to be one of the purposes and objectives, quote unquote, of the zoning act, but that's not to say that,
Yeah, it's not a change I'm saying we make. I'm saying it's a consideration that we do when we get to the modification phase of this project, which is like a year away.
yeah, understood.
You might have a conversation about, I think there will be conversations about what are discrete changes that can be made in the zoning bylaws that can enable the town to be more inviting of business and things like that, or improving of the development of subdivisions and the design of subdivisions and things like that. I think that's a problem that we have now in the town, but it's like I said, it's more of a strategic discussion initially before it is actually putting it into use in bylaws. But I can see what you're saying, though. I agree.
So it'll be in the minutes.
Yeah. My only thing on 1.2 is there's got to be better ways to write those things. But, I have to read it 2 times to 3 times to understand what it's saying sometimes. But my little brain is just a little brain. Don't get it all.
All right, how about anything on 1.22? All right, then let's jump to 1.3 non-conforming uses. Oh, and before I forget, I did go down to the town hall on Monday and speak with Heather downstairs. And throughout we were starting zoning bylaws, and the comment that Dave made about some little changes here and there that may have been made. So she was going to start looking through her notes and things that she has there. And if she comes across anything, she's going to forward that over to it. Anything on 1.3 non-conforming uses, or 1.31 actually. 1.32.
I don't understand it, but other than that,
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you on some of this, Walt. It's like, okay.
yeah, I mean, I literally highlighted 1.32 and said, I don't understand what I just read. But I can figure it out.
All right, anything on 1.33?
Nothing here.
1.34.
Yeah.
All right, next up is 1.4, non-conforming buildings and structures.
Sort of the same thing, but for structures. So.
Okay. Anything on one, did I do 142, 143? Okay, we'll jump to 1.5 definitions. Dave, you said you had some stuff in definitions?
Yeah, there was, well, it's actually the lack thereof. There is a, I was just looking for it here. There's a, part of the bylaw that says that, as far as the height goes, you can have a 35-foot mean grade on a building in town, but, you, can't have 3 stories. And one of the problems we've run into, actually on more than one occasion, is there is no definition for what constitutes a story in the definitions. So although someone could build a structure that had, like I say, a 35-foot mean grade, what constitutes a story? They could have 2 stories with a cathedral ceiling on the 2nd story, and would that constitute a story or not? There's some information that we had picked up the last time we were doing this. A gentleman was remodeling a house up on one of the lakes, and he was having some issues with 3 stories because there was no definition for it. So I would think that when the code company starts going through this might be one thing that we can make a note of, that we have no definition of what exactly constitutes a story.
So where does it say how high the building can be? That's not in the definitions, that's somewhere else?
That's someplace else.
Yeah,
That's,
in Mass State Code, you get, I think residential is 35 feet from grade to the peak of the roof, I believe.
yes, it is. That's on, and that's the zoning restrictions for the town of Ashburnham as well. You can have a 35-foot mean grade,
Yeah.
but no more. But there's nothing in there to say, well, there is something in here. I'm trying to find it right now that says that you can't have 3 stories, that a 3-story building is not allowed. But certainly if you're going to go 35 feet to the mean grade, there's enough height inside the building to permit 3 stories, but there is no definition of what constitutes a story, such as it, I think you've got to have 7 feet, 3 inches to make it a living space. Or it's very confusing as to what's a living space and what's an attic space. So that would just be one thing that I would like to talk to the code company as we're getting into this, is how other towns have worded what a story is.
Okay, I made a note of that, Dave. Good question.
Very good.
You're saying, Dave, that you structures can go 35 feet, but they can't go 3 stories, is that it?
That's correct.
Okay.
That kind of creates some
Yeah.
conflicting engineering, as like I say, then you could have, the second story could be 14 feet high, but you couldn't put another floor in there. And we were trying to figure that out as to what would constitute an attic space. There's some definitions with the Massachusetts State Code for what, and well, that's the Universal Building Code now, which constitutes an attic space. It's the pitch of the roof where the rafters come up, how far into the room do they go? It's kind of a complicated thing, and I think it would be much easier if there was a, in the definitions of what constitutes a story.
Okay.
I know of one person in town that doesn't live too far away from me. The town had determined that his house was 2 3/4 stories and raised his taxes as such. And he asked them, how did you come up with this? He went to the assessor's office and said, how did you come up with this? And they really couldn't give him a straight answer. They just said, that's what we did. Your taxes went up. If you want to appeal it, be my guest. And that was it.
Right. Yeah. Have a nice day.
So Dave, so when you talk about the definition of a story, so are you talking about the minimum height requirement to be a story? Because you really couldn't set a maximum height on it because there's already, you could have, if you wanted to build a building that was 35 feet tall, but it was only 1 story, you could do that. But if you set a maximum height of the story, you possibly couldn't do that.
That's correct. I don't know exactly what the correct wording would be, and I was starting to put pen to paper and start to draw it up, but I said that if I do this, we've got a company that's right on the verge of signing a contract with us that knows all the legal jargon of how to write this up. They're probably just going to end up changing it anyway. So I thought that maybe if we just made a note of it and suggested to that company, that code company, that that's what we're going to want to see in our list of definitions would be what constitutes a story, that they would probably know better than I how to write that up so that it would be legal and fly with the Attorney General.
Okay. Anybody have anything else on the definitions piece?
I'm here.
Okay, let's move on then. Section 2.1, types of districts.
As Walt is familiar with, planning board is working with the MRPC on revisions to section 2 and 3.
Doing away with
Sections 2 and 3 relative to the proposed deletion of the Wetlands and Watershed Protection District and changes to the Water Supply Protection District, all the verbiage associated therewith, which has a bearing on the table 3.2, the schedule of use regulations. We've wanted to have all of that ready for the last town meeting, but it just wasn't pulled together sufficiently enough to do that. So we're hoping to do that in the fall. I'd ask Walt, is MRPC still technically under contract to
They're still
participate?
working, yeah, they're still involved in it.
Okay,
They're still,
All right. All right. Well, in that case, I would say that, sections 2 and 3, except for, well, for the most part, are being dealt with already between the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, and MRPC. The one thing caveat I would have is section 3.34. Floodplain district regulations. That needs, I believe, to be reviewed by Sarah with respect to the most recent state building code to see whether or not what we have from way back when is still pertinent or the most up to date.
So Marcia, what section was that again that Sarah should be looking at?
3.3.4
on page 21.
Okay.
on page 21.
Yeah.
And,
Flood, okay, there it is, yeah.
yeah, 3.3.4. And then, I can't speak to 3.3.5. But maybe Sarah can look at that too. But I think between Walt, myself, and the MRPC, we're kind of got most of section 3 and section 2 in review.
Mhm.
We still have some outstanding, and they are outstanding items, particularly with respect to, I think, Walt, it was the LIB district, which made no sense up on Winchendon Road.
Yeah.
So there's still some boundary related issues that need to be settled during the course of this review with MRPC, which again would be part and parcel of our submittal to the next town meeting. And how they came up with a LIB zoning boundaries way back when is beyond me.
Yeah, I
Marshall,
agree.
It was at the last special permit hearing we had, Marshall, up there on Route 101 and 119. There was some questions that we had about the same exact thing, where the lot lines went, where was the green business, where was the business district.
Yes.
It appeared as though there were two different lot lines depending on what it is the owner of the property wanted to do. He was considering putting a hotel up there and it showed the
Right.
lot line in one place. Then when he was considering putting a home up there, it showed the lot line in another place. So what we had done is we had continued the hearing because we wanted to get more information about that and try to find out where that was. And there's a gentleman from an engineering company called Graz Engineering who was doing
Right.
the engineering up there.
Yep.
And he had showed us a digital plan and he explained to us that when he first started plotting out that lot, that he was using Zoc surveyors lot lines for where those different districts were. And as he looked at them closer, he discovered that Zoc's plans were actually in error, that they were off. So he did some extensive research and explained it to us in great detail, how he came up with exactly where the lot lines were. So he submitted a digital plan that I think is going to be on file somewhere. Have you seen that, Marshall?
He did send a revised plan to the commission because I had comments just on the layout. And I have been in discussion, correspondence with Sarah, because I did find amongst my various, whatever, documents, what the definition of those boundaries were between green business and business. It's 1,000 feet from this, 950 feet from that, blah, blah, blah. And I sent her a schematic of what all that was. So I'm, as you approve or review the ZBA, application, and we review the commission application, I guess both should be cognizant of and make sure that, the boundaries are the same.
Yeah. Were you comfortable with where the boundaries were from the latest plans that engineering firm had submitted?
I haven't, again, looked at it in detail. I asked them to, based on my site visits, to explore the possibility that there were additional wetlands, which were not shown on the plan. Asked them to relocate the house and driveway and things, which I think they did, but I'm still waiting to see the result of the additional wetland survey. But Dave, the ZBA has not completed its review and or rendered a decision as yet?
Yes, we did. We had,
Okay,
after we had continued it at the second hearing, the continuation of the hearing, we were satisfied with what the engineering firm had explained to us and how he came up with where the lot lines were. He had a very detailed graphic plan that showed exactly to the foot, actually to the inch, of where he determined that those lines were. And
okay,
we were right on the verge of considering seeing if we could talk to the town administrator or the selectman about hiring the town engineer to do this for us. But we were satisfied with what the other engineering company did, and we thought that it would be redundant in spending money that we didn't really
Yeah.
need to spend.
all right.
But doesn't that particular request require a special permit, which it now has to go to the Board of Selectmen for consideration?
No, I don't believe so. We were thinking about that and discussing that. And then we talked to the engineer for over an hour about how he came up with where the distinction was between green business and business. And by the time we were done talking to him and he explained it all to us, we were satisfied that those lines, those zoning lines, were sufficient and accurate enough that we felt comfortable enough issuing a special permit.
But that's not the issue. He needs a special permit to make that, to put a house on a business lot.
Well, the law for that, that was another thing that was extremely confusing, because there's, in fact, I've been on the zoning board for just about 30 years, and it was the only time that a lot in question had ever come up to us that had two different zoning districts on it. And the way that the law reads is that if there's two different zoning districts and you plan to build a structure within 50 feet of the zoning district that has the lesser requirement, you can use the square footage for the lesser zoning district requirements for the square footage of the building lot. So he didn't have enough to build a house on the green business district, but he did have enough to build it on the business district, and the house was located within 50 feet of the business district. So therefore,
It's on the business district.
it complied with the law. It was rather confusing and took some studying to kind of figure it out and come to terms with it. It was not a very clear-cut law. I can tell you that, Walt.
I think that there's a problem with that. But I mean, I don't know. I think that there's a,
Well, as we're going through the zoning book, we're gonna come to that section where it describes what the zoning laws are in town and how you determine what square footage you use if there's two different zoning districts on one lot. And
But the
it's-
majority of that lot that he's putting that house on is a business district, correct?
yeah, but
And so
unfortunately,
it says clearly in the law to put a house on a business district, you need a special permit. And the special permit, at least this is what I heard through Roger, that apparently consulted with Deb, our town council, requires approval by the zoning board and then approval by the Board of Selectmen for that special permit.
I'm not aware of the special permit needing approval of a selectman. This is the first I hear of it.
Okay. That was my understanding. I could be wrong.
All right, well,
I
Yes.
think the bigger point here, since we're getting back to what we're doing,
Yeah.
is number one, my reaction to this whole uses is that this section will probably need change based on conversations about other sections we're going to be talking about later. And in particular, I think, for example, the business district bylaw has a real issue with it. And that's what caused the problem to begin with up there at 119 and 101, because of the way that the green business district is written. And they added a section at the very end that allowed a single family home to go on a green business district, which if you read what the purpose of green district is, it doesn't conform at all to what the purpose of what they intended that green business to do. And when I came to your zoning ZBA meeting, Dave, the first time, or the only time I've been there, and it was talked about, why did you put this in there? It was explained, well, we wanted businesses like, bike shops and things like that. And yet we put a single family home on there, which doesn't conform at all when you read the purpose of the green business bylaw. So in my opinion, the green business bylaw either needs to be modified or needs to go away. It just doesn't, serve in fact, in my opinion, the applicant made a farce of our zoning bylaws up there at that corner. I mean, he just ignored them basically and got, played this whole green district border and all of that. And it may be perfectly legitimate, or it might be a stretch. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But the point that I'm saying is we need these. We're going to find when we get into talking about the green business bylaw and things like that, we're going to then end up coming back to this section. So best thing from my point of view is we get this thing codified as it is. We move forward with getting rid of the wetland and and watershed protection district, the W, and do it exactly the way Marshall and the planning board have worked that out. And then as we go through changes in other sections, they'll have a reciprocal, they'll have a domino effect and will affect this bylaw.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to have two members that are on the zoning board now that were on the committee that created and implemented the green business district. So I was able to ask them while over the Zoom meeting, not face to face, but what was your intent of this? Because some of the bylaws, when we're trying to figure out what was the intent, they were written in 1973. The people that wrote it, most of them aren't around anymore. So I can't ask them what in the world they were intending for how this to be implemented, but we were lucky enough to ask a couple of members, what was your intention? And because the green business district was overlapping into a residential district, they didn't want to intend to inhibit any type of development, which would include residential houses there.
Yeah,
But,
and the de facto result was they just treated it as a residential district. I mean, the
Yeah.
green business thing was just ignored essentially by this particular, this particular developer. He wanted to build houses and that's what he built. And
Yeah.
he did everything he could to manipulate it so he could build the houses there, which is fine if the town is happy with that major corner on 101 and 119 being for houses. But I think the original intent for that corner being in business and green business was for that corner to be one of the few areas in this town where we can develop business. And we're not going to be able to do it because of this developer's, preference for what he wanted to develop, which he has every right to do. I'm not taking that away from him. I'm just simply saying he made a farce of our zoning bylaws, in my judgment.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And there was one thing that I had asked Debbie about the amount of square footage for their lesser restrictive lot. Was there any limit to that? And she said, no. I said, so if you had a 25 square foot piece of property that was in the business district and the rest of it was in the green business district, you could use the square footage for the business district? And she said, yeah, there is no, as long as you were within 50 feet of it, there's no restriction on the amount of square footage for that. So I agree with you 100%, Walt, that needs to be changed. And Mark Carlisle, who was the chairman of the committee that wrote the green business district law in there, he had even said at the hearing a couple of weeks ago that he never thought that that was going to be etched in stone, if you will. He said that he truly believed from day one that that was going to have to be modified as time went on. And I mean, we're all working very hard to do some zoning changes here, and we're not getting paid for it. I wouldn't say unfortunately, but what's happened in the past is there's been different committees, the focus committee and other committees that write bylaws, and they certainly absolutely have the town's best interest at heart. There's no doubt in my mind about that. No one would diligently work that hard for no compensation, except to try to have the town's best interest at heart. But now that we found this company that's going to help us rewrite these zoning bylaws, I wished I'd known these people had existed years ago, and I'm sure that there's other committees that will form so that there's not different committees writing different bylaws, and we don't find out about the problems with those bylaws until years later when we're trying to implement them. But that is the truth of the matter, and that what's happened. But now we've got a professional outfit on board that hopefully, when they help us rewrite these bylaws, that won't be, I won't say it will never be an issue, because as time changes, towns change, populations change, bylaws need to change with them. That's one of the reasons we're here as a committee, is because some of these bylaws haven't been changed for 50 years. But hopefully we're going to slow down the problems that are going to arise with bylaw changes that we're not aware of at the time, because we have a professional company doing it for us.
The only thing that I'm going to add is that, Walt, per your comment that a special permit may be required by the select board for a residence in, green business, whatever.
For business, it's not for green business, but for business.
It's for business.
That was my understanding.
Okay.
I could be, I'm wrong. I was just told that. So I don't know if I'm right or not. It just was my understanding. Dave.
All right. Well, it's something that the commission is going to need to determine prior to Monday, because, per the State Wetlands Protection Act, the commission is not supposed to issue an order of conditions approving anything until all the local permits, like the ZBA.
I've never seen that written anywhere, Walt. have you seen that written in the zoning book? or the zoning-
I was told that by a select board member who's very passionate about certain issues, and I think Deb told her. So,
All right, well,
so we want to, I think we can, I think I defer to, I mean, that's a question really, Bill, that maybe you might want to have a conversation about, because that is clearly this is a house that's being put on a business district, and I thought it required a special permit. And I thought in that case, the special permit required not only zoning board approval, but also select board approval. But
I've never seen
I don't
that
know where that's
anywhere.
written. I don't know where it was written, and it was just quoted to me. And it could be,
All right.
I could be completely wrong.
all
I
right.
never went into that. No one's ever mentioned it to me.
Has anybody in your time there on the board ever tried to put a house, a single family home on a business district before?
Yeah, and the zoning board denied him, and he appealed it, and the judge overturned our decision.
Really?
Yeah,
So why do we even have a zoning bylaw then? I mean, why do we have zoning districts? If you can't determine that you have a business district, something zoned for business, and somebody puts a single family home on it, a judge is going to overturn it.
well, that's not to say that a judge will, that depends on the judge. I mean, there's people that are guilty of sin and walk away because they have a good attorney that
Yeah.
convinces a judge they didn't do it.
Yeah,
That depends on your attorney. It's
Yeah.
just, it's the way the legal system works in this country. It's
Yeah.
certainly not ideal, but it's the best we have, and it's better than North Korea, that's for sure.
Well, that's saying something, yeah.
But there's just, people
That's
have.
not a very high standard there, Dave.
I feel so well
people-
off.
People have the right to appeal our decision. And if we say no, they have every right in the world to appeal our decision. There's a certain process they have to follow. They have to do it within 20 days of when our decision gets stamped in. They can go to land court, they can go to Superior Court. I mean,
Sure.
people have a right to appeal anything.
Oh, yeah, and I understand that.
So Dave, did what were they applying? Were they applying for a special permit and or variance?
Yeah, what ended up happening was the cover letter for an appeal typically says on the front part of it, the subject, it says Joe Bush requests for a special permit / variance.
Okay.
What ended up happening, the reason that they did that was because of all the seminars that I go to and trying to learn how to write a defensible decision. What I had asked an attorney from the Attorney General's office, if the zoning board had the authority to change the special permit to a variance or change a variance from a special permit.
Mhm.
And the attorney from the Attorney General's office said, yes, you do, if you write up the cover letter correctly, and you have to write on there any other necessary zoning relief. He said
Mhm.
that gives the zoning board the authority to change a variance to a special permit, which we've done in the past because variances are extremely difficult to grant. As
Right.
there's 4 criteria that you have to meet. It's written in chapter 40A, which is the law of the Commonwealth. A
Right.
special permit, all you have to do is show that it's not detrimental to the neighborhood, nor does it degrade from the intent of the bylaw.
Mhm.
So if we can, it's gotta be pretty clear. We can't throw the laws out the window, but there's
Mm.
been previous zoning enforcement officers who have told people they need a variance, and it's clear as a bell to the board that a special permit applies. So what we had done is sometimes we change that. So one of the building inspectors from a while ago had the land use clerk write up special permit or variance. So the first thing that we do at our hearing is we have a finding as to determine what the appellant is looking for. Does a special permit apply in this situation, or does a variance? And I believe the building inspector at the time, it certainly wasn't Sarah, because she hasn't been here long enough for something like this, but at the
Right.
time, the building inspector commissioner put that in there so that we wouldn't have to change it, that it was easier for us to change it to just have a finding as to what it is we were looking at.
All right, so I guess, again, I'll tell you in a minute. My question is, did you issue a variance?
No, we issued a special permit.
Okay,
A variance wasn't required under.
okay. All right, because looking at section 3.1 of the zoning bylaws, the planning board is the special permit granting authority for special permits requiring site plan review under section 5.10 and for special permits granted in conjunction with planned unit developments, which clearly is not the case relative to this residence at 462 Ashby Road. But
Right, and they, actually, I had talked to, when the site plan review was going into effect, that I went to a couple of the planning board meetings. And John McMillan at the time was the chairman. And I
Right.
was talking to him about site plan reviews. And I had suggested to Mr. McMillan that the planning board should plan and the zoning board of appeals should hear appeals. And that shouldn't the zoning board be granting special permits and the planning board be planning? And all we have to do is adopt the site plan review documents, and then we could approve all special permits. I don't know how well you know John McMillan, but you can only begin to imagine how he responded to me.
A little possessive. Because my second comment is that the ZBA is designated as the special permit granting authority for all special permits that also require a variance.
That's correct. And that's when I had started to talk to John about how he was writing this up, and that I had suggested to him that the appeals board hear all appeals, whether they're special permits or granting authorities across the board. And the idea, the reasoning for this, because what we were trying to do was, we were trying to streamline the permitting authority. Because a lot of times what would happen is, if someone came in and filled out a building permit application, then end up going to the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, the Zoning Board. And so we said, how can we work to streamline this to make the permitting process process a little bit smoother? And what I understand why the planning board at the time had written it like this, because they said, well, if somebody needs a site plan review, and we can consolidate this so that there's one board for them to go to instead of multiple boards. If they need a site plan review, why don't they get a special permit from the planning board while they're there? Made sense to me. Under those guidelines, I said, you know what, you're right. I'm all for streamlining this. And the reason that the other thing says that about a variance is because the zoning board, the planning board can't grant variance. The only board that can grant a variance is the zoning board of appeals. So I said, well, on that same note, then if someone needs a variance and a special permit, why send them to two boards?
Right.
If they got to come to the zoning board anyway for a variance, we might as well grant them the special permit as well.
Right.
So John said, yeah, I can give you that. He said, I can understand how you do that. And there was also some other options that we threw around at the time. You can have a multi-board meeting. The zoning board and the planning board can meet at one time, which would really be the ultimate way to streamline things. So that if somebody needed zoning board approval and planning board approval, we could meet at the same time and do both the approvals at one hearing. So that was something else we had thrown around. We have yet to do that, but I believe that that's still a legal way to do things. For that matter, I believe we could do that with the Conservation Commission too, Marshall. As if you needed to issue a permit and conditions and the planning board did, we could set that up so that it was a joint board meeting, which would help people to streamline the process.
Yeah, no,
Which-
and you know, I've experienced that before. That's not uncommon. But here's my bottom line conundrum. Per the schedule of use regulations, a special permit within the business district is needed for a single family detached dwelling. All right, so the question becomes, who issues the special permit?
Well, it would be the zoning board of appeals unless there is a site plan review there. And a site plan review is usually a larger scope of a project than just a single family dwelling. It involves multiple parking spaces. There's
Right.
usually a lot more involved in that than just a single family dwelling.
Right,
So I
but
haven't had a chance to talk to Sarah about this, but I remember when Dick Reynolds first became the zoning enforcement officer and the building commissioner, he had said, what kicks off a site plan review? And I said, well, really what you should do is ask the planning board if a site plan review is going to be required on this lot. And if they tell you no, then the zoning board of appeals would be the board that would be hearing a special permit.
okay, but this gets back to what I asked about whether a variance is required, because it says the zoning board of appeals is a special permit granting authority for special permits that also require a variance. And since this didn't require a variance, the ZBA can't be the special permit granting authority.
Well, I think that the way you're looking at it, Marshall, is that it's not the special permit granting authority if and only if a variance is required at the same time.
Well,
If a
that's,
variance,
you know, I'm all for the English language. And that's why,
90% of the time, 90% of the time, it's either a variance or a special permit. It's either or. But every once in a while, we do come across a situation where somebody needs a special permit and a variance. And the intent of writing that like that was to streamline the permitting process.
okay, all I'm getting at is that, you know, if you read that paragraph literally, it can't be the ZBA. And if you read the preceding paragraph about the planning board being the special permit granting authority, which is also only under the site plan review or a PUD, then neither of you can be the special permit granting authority, in which case, who the heck is?
And that's, I think, the root of where this came. I mean, I'm
I
texting,
hate to be,
trying to
you
find
know-
out, I'm texting to find out where it does say, you know, that.
Okay. All I'm
When
saying
does
is
the
that-
select board come into approval? You
Well,
know,
all I'm
so-
saying is that, to me, as a lay interpreter of
Yeah.
this, there's confusion. And it's like, I'm sorry, you can't be verbatim as I read this.
Yep.
So, okay, who is?
Well, I think, Marshall, that the exact wording of this is the zoning board of appeals are designated as special permit granting authority for all special permits that also require a variance. It
Right.
doesn't say that only situations where a variance is required. It doesn't limit it like that. It just says that with a special permit granting authority, if a variance is required. And I was there when John McMillan was writing the law, and I was at the town hall when we were trying to get this whole thing passed, and I know what the intent was, because I looked John right in the eye and sat across the table from him and had a rather heated discussion about it. And the reason that they put special permits that also require a variance was to streamline it. not to eliminate the zoning board from being a special permit granting authority under any circumstance. That was not the
And,
intent of the
and
bylaw.
I'm not questioning any of that. All I'm saying is, you know, I come in out of nowhere, I read this and, you know, it's confusing. And I think all we're saying is that maybe it needs to be looked at and revised to be made clear.
Oh, yeah, and where I would jump in and support both of you on this one is that the intent is one thing, but what it says is another thing. And
Yeah, I mean,
to me, what it says is the special permit granting authority of the planning board has its limitations,
right,
and the special permit granting authority of the zoning ZBA has limitations. And the way it reads here is it's like planning board is the special permitting granting authority for site plan reviews and stuff like that, but it doesn't specifically say anything about whether you can put a house on a business zoned district. That's the zoning. But
right.
if it doesn't require a variance, it makes it sound like, hey, special permit, the only time you get involved is when they also have to have a variance. But I like your idea, Dave, that we have an opportunity here when we get back to this, because this is all we're doing now is highlighting it as a problem.
Right.
But when we get back to it, we need to think about creative ways to streamline the process. That in something like this would have been ideal for a joint meeting of zoning ZBA and the planning board to, have a discussion. Do they need a variance or do they not need a variance? Is this something we want to, do we have a reason to grant a special permit or not? Blah, 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 blah. And
I think, Walt, that I don't think the 20-day appeal period has gone by. I think that you could appeal the zoning board's decision if you wanted to, but you'd have to act pretty quick.
Yeah.
No, the Superior Court's not someplace I want to be.
I'm obviously guessing. I don't expect either one of you guys to do that.
I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, this is all this is really for Bill's purposes. This is just a big highlighted couple paragraphs of this that we got.
And I could try to reach out to Debbie, but she's not around.
No.
She usually leaves town on Thursday and doesn't surface back until Monday or Tuesday. So the whole thing at this point may be moot.
well, but I think it's a big item that needs to be resolved.
Oh, yeah, no question about that. I mean, as it specifically relates to this one situation,
Right.
I think the ship has sailed.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it has, and the Conservation Commission is, which will be dealing with this on Monday, is going to accept the fact that, the ZBA has acted, and, I don't know, as Walt says, whether any other special permits are required. So, we're just going to go ahead and do what we're going to do.
Right. Okay, so we're past our appointed hour. Do we want to do section 4 tonight, or do we want to hold off on that?
I would hope.
Considering that I want you to get your sleep tonight, given that you have to stay up until you get some
Yeah,
work.
it's there's no sleep going on anyway, so.
Well, I think what we've covered is good. And, as far as the meeting minutes, I can certainly write up, a status of where we stand with respect to what the planning board and the commission have been, ongoing for the past several months. So that we can start fresh with section 4 and go on from there.
Yep.
All right, so I like that idea. Well, obviously, we're going to do more than section 4.
Well,
But
true.
Section 5, covers a whole bunch of pages. So how far along do you want to go? Do you want to go down to like 5.5, wireless communication facilities and towers? Or do you want to go further than that?
0.5. Well,
Well,
if you want to,
basically, if you went to you went to 5.6, you'd have about the same number of pages that we had to deal with this last one.
Why don't you?
I agree with Walt, the 5.6, that's another 24 pages, plus or minus.
Yeah.
About the same amount. And we all knew this was gonna be a hot topic, what you've been discussing. Going forward, I'm not sure that that's gonna exist on some of these.
Yeah.
Coming up, but
Right.
never say never. Let's try that. I'd try that again, another
We'll
section.
do the best we can with it. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
One thing I just remembered though, that I should have brought up on a new business. So we were in, with the governor's changes on the rules and regulations as it relates to COVID-19, his emergency powers evaporate on June 15th. We're told, and we're seeking clarification, that along with those special powers, the Zoom meetings evaporate as well. So we may have to be doing these things in person going forward. I'm lobbying to still see if we can do these on Zoom, because frankly, it's very functional for us to do it. Nobody's coming to the meetings or anything like that. It's a lot simpler to work with. So I just throw that out there as a possibility. We're scheduled to go in 2 weeks, which would be June 3rd. So we'll be fine. We'll be under the still under the emergency orders there. So we'll be fine with that. And hopefully by then I'll have some clarification about how we can move forward with it.
Yeah, I would vote for the Zoom. Again, we all sort of work remotely, Walt's called in a couple times from the car. I mean, for the Board of Health, this has worked out really well for us because, again, people work on 128, 495, they pull over and they participate in the meeting, then get on. So this has actually worked to our advantage to have something like this. So,
Yeah, I don't see anything additional to be accomplished by,
face.
No, just
being in person.
honestly, just eating up more of our time getting there and getting back and
Exactly.
doing that whole
Yeah.
thing. So,
Yeah.
all right, so I will work on that and we'll see what we can do. And unless anybody has anything else, then
So let me just say that we're going to review sections 4 through what, 5.6?
5.6.
Okay.
And I'll make him, Bill Johnson makes a motion to adjourn. Anybody want to second that?
Glenn Hathaway, I second.
There was just one more thing, Bill, that what
Yep.
the zoning board of appeals would really like to be able to start meeting again in person. So if that, I just wanted to throw that out there, as I understand that because no one comes to our meetings. But believe me, when we're ready to go to the town hall, there'll be plenty of people complaining about all the decisions we've come up with. That always happens. But,
Well, I think, I know, the Board of Selectmen's meeting on June 7th, we're going back live in person. So we'll be going full board back live. And I
the
think,
zoning board would like to do as soon as possible. The zoning board would
well,
like.
the just so you'll know, the plan right now is to have the town fully open and operational June 1. Library, town hall, everybody and everything. So I know the library folks are meeting on Tuesday. I don't know what the result of that meeting was, but yeah, generally speaking, we got to move along. It's time to get back to some normalcy, but I know there's provisions for people to remote into meetings. I don't know why we just can't all remote into a meeting, and maybe we can. So I'm just trying to figure out a way for us to do that. Because the last thing I need is another open meeting violation.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Just as a point of interest. So, all right, we have a motion to adjourn. Glenn Hathaway seconded the motion.
Yes.
I'll call the roll. Bill Johnson, yes. Dave Perry? Say yes, Dave.
Yes,
Glenn Hathaway?
Yes.
yes.
Walt Meissner?
Yes.
Marshall Dennis?
Yes.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Good
Okay,
luck
you too.
tonight. Yeah.
Enjoy.
I will see you. Yeah, bye.
Yep.